In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the rear brakes on this Ford E-350 van. Let's get started. If your wheel has a hubcap, use a pry bar to pry it off. When you push the pry bar in, go as far as you can and pry it off. Now use a 22mm socket to remove all 8 lug nuts and then pull the wheel off. If your wheel is stuck on, put a lug nut back on so it doesn't come flying off. Tap it with a rubber mallet on the back side of the tire. Take it off. With a 21mm socket, preferably a thin wall socket and an extension, remove the top caliper bolt. I'm going to leave it in a couple threads so I can hold the caliper while I remove the bottom one. The lower one is right down here, also 21mm socket. Take that out. Remove the top bolt, set it aside, and remove the caliper assembly. This is stuck on the rotor a little bit, so it'll require some prying. Get a pry bar, slide it out. Okay, now when you do this, make sure you have something to hook it on with so it doesn't hang by the brake hose. I'm just going to use a bungee cord to support it. Perfect. Now you can remove your rotor. Let's clean up the surface of the axle where the rotor sits. It's not too bad. It's a little bit dirty on the side and especially in the center here. So I'm going to use a wire brush. If you need to sand it down a little bit, go ahead. Just make sure you don't remove too much material with a coarse sanding disc. Rinse this down with some brake parts cleaner after you're done cleaning it. Apply a thin coating of anti-seize to the surface of the axle. Now you don't want to get it on the lug studs or on the parking brake shoes, so if you have the brushed kind, that's best. I have the spray kind, so I'm just going to protect the e-brake shoes as I spray this. Install your rotor backwards, and this will help you hold it on here so you can clean the braking surface, not just this one, but also inside where the parking brake shoes ride. From the factory, it's coated with oil so it doesn't rust, so take brake parts cleaner, spray it down inside and out, and a rag to clean it all off and wipe it after you spray it down. Perfect. Now install the rotor the right way and wipe off the outer surface. From the old caliper, remove the pads. And the reason I have the caliper off like this is because you can't actually reach the slider pins to remove the caliper bracket and the caliper separately since the leaf spring is in the way. So what I'm going to do now is just tap the caliper bracket off and basically slide it out this way. There we go. Mine was very stuck, seized in there. So this is how I chose to remove it. Of course, we have quite a bit of cleanup to do. So let's set this caliper bracket aside for cleaning. While we're here, let's inspect the pistons on the caliper, make sure everything is in good shape. It looks like it is. So we're going to push this back now. And to do that, I like to have the bleeder screw open So I'm going to put the caliper up in its normal resting position like this, so the bleeder screw can be at the top. I'm going to crack this open and then use a dual piston caliper depression tool to press these in, because if you just push one at a time in, the other one actually pops out. If you have a cap for the bleeder screw, take it off. Mine doesn't have one. So I'm going to take a 10mm wrench, break this bleeder screw free. I have a collection bucket catching all this fluid, and the brake fluid is already coming out. I'm going to install my tool in here. And now slowly compress these pistons. It should take minimal force. If it requires a lot of force, most likely one or both of them are stuck and you need a new caliper. That's it right there. They bottomed out. Remove your tool. Give this a second so any air that's in there can bleed out. And there you have it. Once you have a nice steady trickle of clean fluid, you can close this off. Snug it. This doesn't need to be extremely tight, just snug. Wipe this off. We're going to spray it down with some brake parts cleaner, but I do want to wipe off all the brake fluid first. On the caliper, you have these caps where the slider pins go through. We're going to pop these off. There's two of them, one on each side. We'll do this side first. And inside, I'm going to use a bore brush to clean out everything that's there. I have a lot of rust. If you don't, you can just stick a rag through it, clean out the old grease. But I have to clean out all the rust that's in here. I'm going to clean out all the rust that's in here with a bore brush on my drill. Rinse this off with brake parts cleaner. If you have access to compressed air, blow this out. You also want to make sure that these two ridges here are clean. Mine actually surprisingly are. This is where the boots seal up, and it's important for them to stay clean. I'm going to put a little bit of silicone paste in here. And the reason I say a little bit is because, well, you can't put too much. If you do, it'll just get pushed out when the slider pin goes through. So it's important to have it coated, but it's also just as important not to put too much in there, because then it'll squeeze out, get all over your brakes, and you don't want that. You just want it to protect it from rust and to allow this to slide easily. Now, if you use silicone paste, you want to make sure it's rated for brakes, for high temperatures. Otherwise, it'll melt off. If not, just use brake grease. I'm also going to put it around the ridges here on the outside where the boots seal up. Now do the same to the other side. Moving on to the caliper bracket, I'd like to remove these pins. Use a 10mm hex bit. Tap it in if needed. Make sure that's fully seated, and hopefully you have a power tool to help you remove these. There we go. They shouldn't be extremely tight, and you might not have to remove them, especially if yours are in good condition, but as you can see, mine are in desperate need of a cleanup. I want to get all this rust off of here, and I want to get these boots back over there. Now, you want to pay attention to the sleeve that's here. This, when I clean it on the wire wheel, I'm actually going to remove, because I don't want to catch this on the wire wheel and damage it. It's surprisingly not swollen and not very damaged, so it is reusable as long as the pin cleans up. There we go. So this is now something that I can clean in my wire wheel, get it nice and shiny again, and we'll come back and reinstall them. I got these cleaned up on my wire wheel. I'm going to install the rubber sleeve now. Coat these with a little bit of silicone paste or brake grease, not just because of it making it easier for that rubber sleeve, but we're going to have to do this anyway to lubricate the pins. So I might as well do it now. Get this over just like this. Push it on. Perfect, that's seated. If these are swollen or broken, I know this one doesn't look the best, but it is still usable. Once again, if they're swollen or broken, replace them. Add some grease to the pins. There we go, just coat it all around. Take these boots, and I like to put some grease inside of them. This will keep the pins lubricated for a long time. It'll provide grease as needed, basically as the brakes operate. And then take that pin that we just lubricated and slide it with the thread end of the pin towards the narrow side of the boot, and it'll seat just like this. Thread this into the caliper bracket. Snug it up. The torque for these is 45 foot-pounds. It's going to be very difficult for me to torque it with the caliper bracket floating around like this, but if you have a power tool like me, you can just snug it up with that. Or you can snug it up once it's bolted onto the van, but it's going to be quite difficult, especially for the top one, since you can't reach it. Do the same to the other pin. Let's remove the anti-rattle clips, clean up underneath them, and re-lubricate. Take them out, set them aside. Take a wire brush, clean it, and if it's severely rotted, you could sand it down with a sanding disc, but be careful when you do that. You don't want to remove too much material to where the pads now move around excessively. You just want to clean it up so there's no rust. Take a light amount of silicone paste or brake grease, add it to these areas that you cleaned. This will prevent rust from building up, and if it swells from rust, it'll actually push the pads in and make them stuck. If they get stuck, you won't have adequate braking. Take the anti-rattle clips and make sure it's the correct side. Slide it in, make sure it goes down in the bracket, just like that. Press it in all the way. Perfect. Flip it over, do the same to the other side. Now let's take our caliper bracket, slide it into the caliper with the slider pins, just like this. There we go. That's slid in nice and easy. What I want to pay attention to is the boot right here. I suspect this is why the pins were dried up to begin with. That boot actually has to seat right in that groove. It was not seated like that before. So I'm going to take a pocket screwdriver and very gently push this boot right up, kind of help it seat in there. Try not to damage it, of course, by doing that. Some grease will come out. That's all right. We'll wipe it off after. Okay. All right, so there's one. At this point, since I'm here, I might as well put the cap on the other end, since we no longer need to access these. Give it a couple twists, nice and sealed up, and then flip this around. It's going to be difficult just because the brake hose is so short. It doesn't give you much space to work with. And we'll do the same over here. Get this boot seated, nice and sealed up. There we go. That's seated. Get that little cap up top. Seat that in place as well. Perfect. Wipe off any grease that may have leaked out just so it doesn't get all over the place. On our new pads, one of them will have a backing that has two little humps on it. That will go on the piston side because the humps will line up with the cutouts on the caliper. If you try to put it on the other way, it won't fit. And when you do this, you're going to want to lift up these little tabs here as the caliper, or as the pad slides into the caliper. These are just little springs that hold pressure on the pad as it operates. Perfect. So that's in. We'll do the same with the other pad, except this one does not have any humps at all, so you just line it up and slide it in. Same thing about these little springs though. You have to pry them out of the way. This one actually is easier. Okay, both pads are in. Now we can grab the caliper, line it up with the rotor, hold the pads so they don't fall out. Perfect. Start your bolts in. Once one is started, you can let go and start in your other one. Now the torque for these is 166 foot-pounds, so let's bottom them out and torque them. Just going to snug them up a little bit. Once again, 166 foot-pounds. There's one. And two. Let's put the wheel back on. Put back all 8 lug nuts. We're going to bottom them out in a cross pattern and also in a cross pattern so that wheel can seat evenly. We're going to torque these to 148 foot-pounds. $148 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. There we go. Double check them if you'd like. The hubcap has a cutout here. You want to line that up with the valve stem so that it can actually fit on. Slide this over and tap it in. Let's top off the master cylinder, which will be found in the engine compartment on the driver's side, right up against the firewall. This one's quite dirty, so I'm actually going to clean this off. I don't want any of this debris getting inside once I pull the cap off. So with a rag, I'm just wiping it all down. It doesn't have to look perfect. I just want to get the majority of this sand and dirt off of here. Now, remove the cap, and mine is quite dirty, but if you read carefully, it says to use .3 brake fluid, which is exactly what I'm going to use to top this master cylinder off up to the max line, which you can see right on the side here. So basically right below the top right here. All right, there we go. Cap it off, take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.